All right, it's official. Thank you all for being here for this month's installment of the Focus On program. Really excited to be focusing on K-State libraries. I had the opportunity to be at campus last week for the Czech conference, which is one of the first times I've done that. So that was super cool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Uh, welcome to all of you, but welcome especially to our guest, Tara Coleman. Thanks, Tara. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your experience in libraries?
Yeah, so my name is Tara Coleman. I work at Kansas State University. We have several library branches. I work at our main library, Hale. I've worked at K-State since 2004, and I am currently the program services coordinator, and I am a full professor. I wear a lot of other hats, so I work in our innovation lab. I work in our Dallas Center for Multicultural and Community Studies, and then I have service responsibilities on campus.
Great, thanks
I
for that.
Yeah, I've worked in libraries since I was a kid, and I could be a library aide. And I didn't expect to go to library school. I was an undergrad at K State, and I worked in the library, and I was getting an English degree, and I didn't know what to do with my life. And I'm like, I'm gonna join AmeriCorps. I don't know what to do. And then one of the reference librarians said, Kara, why don't you go to library school? You've worked in libraries forever. And I don't know why it never occurred to me. And I'm so glad I did. I went to the University of Oklahoma, and my first grown up job was here at K State, and I've been here ever since.
That's awesome. You have such a long history with Kansas State University, and
Yeah.
I completely can relate to that. Having librarianship staring you right in the face, and
Yes.
like in my example was, I felt like maybe I was trying to swim upstream away from it, and then as soon as I was just like, let the current take you, it was so refreshing. So can majorly relate to that. What can you tell us about Manhattan or just your community? What should we know of what it's like, and especially from that academic lens?
Yeah. So it's funny because I grew up in a small town. I grew up in Newton, Kansas. So if you are not familiar with Kansas, a small town by Wichita. And in my mind, it is stuck in 1998. I know it has grown. But coming to Manhattan was sort of a culture shock because to my small town, it was a big city. It had this giant university with people from all over the world. And our campus little entertainment area is close by. It's called Aggieville. And that blew my mind. And a mall and a theater and restaurant, these things that I did not have access to at the time. So I think that if you were coming from a small town, Manhattan is a really big city. And if you're coming from a Chicago, a Kansas City, a Dallas, it might be a small town to you. So we've got a little bit of those vibes. We're right next to Fort Riley Military Base, and from my understanding, from people who've traveled, our relationship is a good one. I think they call like town and gown. I think that Manhattan has maybe not always had the best relationship with campus, but I think that we're working really hard to be a good community. And I know that I enjoy living here and working here. And there are a lot of opportunities. I have a child who we can walk to school. We can walk to parks, and I really appreciate that. Because I grew up in a small town, it is really nothing for me to drive to Kansas City or Omaha or Wichita to do other things. So that is not a problem for me. And I appreciate the feel of a more small town. So I think it depends on where your heart lies on whether or not this is a forever home or a just for now home.
Excellent. So peel behind the curtain a little bit. Let us know just a little bit about operation. I'm sure there is a lot of staff. Like you said, lots of different locations. What can you tell us just so we have like a general overview of how that works?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be vague with numbers because I might get it wrong. So on the Manhattan campus, we have let's say 70 to 80 staff. That might not be correct. And we have the main library, which is Hale. We have a library in our math physics building, math physics library, and then one in our College of Architecture, Planning, and Design. And then the Salina campus has a library as well. Um, our campus, our library, we have things that you would see at a good size university. We have both public and technical services, so we have reference. We have a department that liaisons with our colleges and our classes. We have a technical services, so we do metadata, preservation, content, acquisitions, all that good stuff. We also have a special collections and archives, and then the work that I'm connected with is our innovation lab. So we have a lot of flavors of library in our organization.
Can you just a follow up on that? Just give us just a general idea of like what's the upper administration look like, at least
Oh
as you
yeah,
perceive it. As public libraries, we're used to boards. What's it like for you?
that's great. So it's funny because I'm on the board of our public library, and it's been wonderful for me to have that experience. So at our library, we have a dean, and we currently have two positions that are associate dean, and then we have directors. So at our organization, we have jobs that are tenured track. So, for example, I have tenure at my rank as professor, but we have a lot of positions that are not tenure track. And that could be someone who's in our IT department. It could be someone who is in cataloging or public services. But our dean's office, which could be director level if you are at a public library, it's our dean, our two associate deans, and then we have a director of finances and HR. And then we all report to one of those four people in some way. So I report to our associate dean who works with our public facing departments.
Great. All right, so this is kind of exciting for to move on to. I think a lot of us were probably familiar with the fire that happened at the Hale
Yeah.
Library, which I think was 2018, if I remember.
May 2018. I think it might be this week. That is the
Wow.
anniversary. Again, don't
Yeah,
don't quote me on that one.
right. So I'm sure that had a giant effect. I wasn't there before, but I was there last week and got to see it. A little bit of innovation lab. I feel like that I heard last week that the planning for the innovation lab started before the fire. So I
Hmm.
imagine that caused a little bit of a shakeup. So, what can you tell us, especially the library that you spend the most time in, just about the facilities and what we would find there?
Yeah. So we like to say we are in the heart of campus. We are in the middle. We are a really beautiful building. The last pre-fire renovation was in 1920. Oh my gosh, how old am I? 1997, not 1927. And I actually came as a student in 1998. So when I came in, it was brand new. I remember all of the computers and the desks, and it was so awesome. So we had our fire in 2018, and we had to basically restart from the bones up. So if you were to come in, one quirky thing about our building is that we have two entrances, but for years and years and years, you could only actually get into the building on the second floor. And now you can enter on the first floor, and you'll see the way we've structured it is that so it's like, I don't want to say noisy, but like loud. The higher up you go, the quieter it gets, which I really appreciate. So computers can be noise, books mean quiet. And I think that visual difference really helps our students. So you go in, and on the first floor, you may be like, well, where are all the books? But the way we've structured is like, that's our cafe, that's our group study. We have the classic stacks you'll see in a lot of libraries. And we still have those. That's the same from before the fire, but the rest of the space is different. We have new carpet and new furniture, and some of the layouts have changed. One of the discoveries that I appreciate the most is that when they built Hale around our old library feral, it looks like they covered up the beautiful limestone and now it's exposed. So when you walk in, you can see one of the previous uh, editions that they had. And then we still have books. We have over 2 million books, items in our collection. Some of them are on in Hale, some are in our branches, but a good portion will be in our annex. And we have that, if you're familiar with Manhattan, we have our own airport. So it's close to our airport off of one of our highways. And we get something from there every day. So if you put in a request today, I think you probably understand if you work at a library, like, oh, if you do it before this time, you'll get it that day. But if you do it after that time, you might get it the next business day. And we have that as well.
So I think this is a good time to continue to talk about facilities and just a little bit more because I was super impressed, and I think a lot of people are interested in maker spaces, and you guys have one. Um, One quick question before, was there a makerspace before the innovation lab? And if so, how is the new innovation lab different?
Right. There was conversation and planning, but we hadn't actually built it yet. I'm going to share the link to our innovation lab in the chat so folks can look through it if you're so interested. So there was conversation and planning, and the planning was like a room, but not a big deal. And after the fire, the lore, as I understand it, is the Sunderland Foundation gifted us more money. So we were able to expand. And because we were starting from scratch, we were able to reimagine the space. So instead of one room, we have a good portion on the first floor and the second floor of the library. And the way it sort of divides out is when you're on the first floor, the main floor of the library, you'll see audio visual. So you'll see we have a sound booth that has professional equipment that you would find in a billboard studio. My favorite room is our one button studio, which has a green screen. And this is my favorite because it's so accessible. I work with kids and kindergartners can figure it out and record a video. We also have our what we call our makerspace, which is our fabric arts. So we'll have sewing machines, embroidery machines, donated fabric thread, a Cricut with donated vinyl. We buy things, but people have been very generous. And what do you do if you clean out grandma's closet and you find like 30 skeins of yarn? We will take it. And it gets used. Our makerspace is really popular. Also on the first floor, we have our media studio with Macs and PCs with audiovisual software. So if you want to use a Wacom tablet and hand draw, you can. You want to edit a video, you want to use Illustrator to create graphics, we have that available and it's free. And our second floor, you'll find what we call the fab space, so fabrication, and that's 3D printing, laser cutting, and then our power tools and our hand tools. So if someone needed to use a saw, before you all came on, we were talking about how we let our patrons have constrained freedom. So oftentimes we'll have young people who come in, they say, I want to use the saw because I get to do it in 4-H and I did it in Scouts and my parents let me do it. And they might be more skilled than me. They are definitely more skilled than me. But we have to say, you need to have a guardian. I trust that you do this, but still. And even grown-ups, I say, if you can cut your finger off, you got to tell us first before you use it so that we know what's going on. But in general, we have some procedures, but we want people to have the freedom to come in and create with guidance rather than with micromanaging from us.
And that's kind of what I was mentioning to you is I often hear the first things over the last decade when people are talking about let's have a makerspace, but first volume, second smells, and then third, like, liability. And it
Yes.
kind of seems like not that you guys overlooked any of that, but that you kind of weighed the pros and cons of having this like in people's hands versus like you called it micromanaging. What I really liked, and I already mentioned this to Tara, is that I saw throughout the space there's QR codes,
Mm-hmm.
and I love how they're made often out of the materials for that. So if you're looking at the 3D printed, it's a QR code out of 3D printed material. If you're looking at the laser cutter, it's a wood cut of the QR
Yeah.
code. But then people can scan that and it's basically a libguide of how to use that equipment. And this is what I really like too is that from what most of them I saw, there was two kind of tracks. One was here's a project that you can try. It kind of sets it up, or the other option is sky's the limit. You have a project you want to work on, and we can facilitate either of those. So that really impressed me as kind of a DIYer.
Yes. And let me backtrack. I shouldn't have used the word micromanage. One of the differences between us and a public library is the majority of our patrons are over 18. If we were in a public library, we would have different rules because of the ages. And even some people over 18 need to have more guidance. So micromanaging was the wrong word. We have rules too. And what I want to say is that we let people creatively express themselves and we want to be there to help them and to step in if we believe that they are on a track to danger. But generally, we don't have to worry about that. We've had small fires in our laser cutter. I won't lie, but that's not always the fault of the user. Sometimes that is because of the material. And when you get new machines, it takes a little bit to collect to figure out what is the right setting to like etch versus burn.
Mhm.
So I recognize that if you have a set of rules in your space, you have a good reason for it, and I'm not questioning that.
Very good. Okay, well, anything else about Innovation Lab? I highly recommend people stop by and check that out if they're
Yeah.
in the area. It is open to the public, so
Yeah, and I want to emphasize we are open to the public, and our biggest challenge is actually parking on campus. Um, but if you can get past that, we would love you to come. We have school field trips, and I work with them. We also have homeschool groups who come and do their science work in the Innovation Lab. And for anyone who is interested, they can reach out, and I will work with them. I'll show them how to park. We will plan an activity or reserve spaces that you can use it, and it doesn't cost anything. And we want to make sure that anyone who's interested has the ability to access the space.
great. Um, okay, so next we usually talk about programs and services, and I think that you've got a great program that you lead amongst your other projects. Can you tell us about that or any of the other programs and services?
Yeah, so my biggest additional responsibility is coordinating the K-State First Book, which is our common reading program. And it's actually not housed under the libraries, it's housed under our first year experience program, and the libraries is a partner. So, what we do is that we have a committee of students, staff, and faculty who are given a theme to help narrow down the bajillions of books out there to help find one book that we think will create a good common experience for our first year students. And I have met with lots of programs around the country, and I think that what we do is really important and special for us. I think sometimes programs, let's say that they are a wealthier school, have the capability to spend a lot of money, and sometimes they select a book that makes them look good, but maybe does not necessarily connect with their students. And that is not our goal. Our goal is provide an academic comic experience, comic we should also do a comic experience, but mostly a common experience. We want to offer opportunities for our students, staff, and faculty and the community to practice civil discourse, which can be often really hard, especially when you're doing it on a topic really close to your heart. But having a discussion and it's over a book that it could be like what a book is a window into your life or a mirror to your experience or a window into someone else's. That's a really good way for people to express themselves, gain empathy. You do not have to like it. And some of the best conversations I've had with people are the ones where they tell me why they don't like something. And I like it because it's not only an opportunity to practice civil discourse, but it helps people to articulate their values or the discipline that they're learning in, the theories that they're learning, and apply it to the book. So you can tell me, for example, I hate opera sucks. That's unacceptable. Opera sucks because I only speak English and I don't understand Italian. And when they sing really high, it hurts my ears. That is an acceptable answer. And that gives me an opportunity to have more discussions. So we work it in, we have a book. We just announced our book, and I'm going to share the link to the page. So our book for 2024 is Deaf Utopia. Here's the page. And while we are planning events for that, we are in the process of selecting the book for 2025. And we always use a theme. Our theme for 2025 is freedoms and opportunities. So as you think, we accept nominations. And if you have a title that would be amazing, you can nominate it. We have a link on that page. And we review all the books and we will have it narrowed down in the fall. So let's say about 10 to 12. And then we will narrow it down to 3 titles. And when we have 3 titles, we gather campus and community feedback. And we actually rank our books. So we're technically not selecting it. It's selected by our provost, but in most cases, they're going to go with what we selected as our book 1. But if there's a reason we can't do book 1, so let's say that we find out that the author plagiarized, we would go with book 2. or book 3, depending on how it is. So if there is a reason we can't select it, we have reasons. And we are data informed. So when we work through this, it's not like I'm picking this book because I like it. Everything has to be discussed in the lens of our incoming first year students. And we have a list of outcomes and a list of criteria that committee needs to follow. There are occasions where I might pull a book out of our process because I know it's not a good fit. If you email me your own personal book, that's probably something we're not going to review. If it's a textbook, if it is written for a different audience, like our audience is first year students, most of them come from Kansas. Most of them have a different range of educational experiences. So we want people to be able to read this book on their own. And not everything can be read on their own. Like I think about when I was in high school, I took a humanities class and we read the Odyssey. And as a 44-year-old, I can understand it. But at 17, I really needed to have a teacher every day explaining what was being said. So that's not a good fit for our students. And then when we know, we announce it in the spring, and then we just start all over again.
And remind me, how long has this program been going on?
So our first year was a fail. And I think it's important to know that. We thought we're an ag school, we'll do an ag book. That did not work out because we didn't know what we were doing. So we talked to other programs and we started all over. So our first book was in 2010 and it was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And we weren't so sure how this would work. So we said, we're going to try this. And if it doesn't work out, we'll just never do it again. Like nothing's lost. And it was awesome. And
That's
we've been
great.
doing it ever since. And I've led the program since then, or from its beginnings.
It's really great to hear about people kind of taking a risk on a program, and I know we've done it here at our library system. And sometimes you have to be willing to say like, this is a pilot. We're gonna try it out, and if it's not great, we'll adapt. Can you just, while another moment on this, and I don't know if is there like a certain type of challenge that you are dealing with this ongoing project that never ends? What's the stickiest points of it all? Is it just trying to get all of these different organizations to work together, or just to find that right book that has the right messaging and really suit your audience?
That's a great question. So I think that in general, we have a really good process and people are very cooperative. Um, we we want to have a book that will be a good fit for our students and not so sometimes we pick a book and it's really faculty staff love it and our students don't click. And that's not the greatest experience. We want a book that is used in the classroom, outside of the classroom. A club might use it. It can be used in extracurricular activities. So a good book will be someone can use it in a humanities class, a social science class, a science class. It gets used maybe in the residence halls. Our union programming council will plan some activities around it. And people outside of our core event planning group will say, hey, I'm for example, Beach Museum of Art. We want to do an event and we're going to call it the Common Work of Art. So based on your book, we're going to have a display all semester or all year with a book that fits a piece of art that fits the themes. And I will say, I think sometimes people think it's we just picked a book out of nowhere, and that's not the case. We actually have a pretty thorough process. In the summer, the committee just reads samples because people are going to quit in the first 30 pages. So we read first either 30-ish or 3 chapters, whatever is first. And then we have a set of evaluation questions because we want to be data informed. And when we narrow it down in the fall, our questions are harder. And part of it is a risk assessment. And I think that's actually the hardest thing for our committee. So let's say it's Little House on the Prairie. Your job is to tell me who's going to be upset if we select this book. Who is going to call me up cussing? True story. Who's going to call the dean of students upset? True story. And sometimes people are like, there's nothing bad you can say about it. Well, that means that you're only thinking about it from your perspective because you like it, everyone will like it. So sometimes part of the challenge is finding committee members willing to like look at the other side. And when we have our 3 books, I reach out and I ask possible partners. So when we did, if our book has an international flair, I always talk to the International Student Center and say, What do you think? Do you think this is a fair representation? Would you be our partner? So when our controversy comes in a lot of ways, so I'm not going to, I think that we want good controversy. It's okay if people have some concerns because we want to open up dialogue. So when our book was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, before we talked to anybody, I talked to the Manhattan Police Department and K-State Police Department. So sorry, Riley County Police Department and K-State Police Department. And I said, here's the book, here's some copies. What are your concerns? Will you be our partners? And both of them were like, yes, we will be your partners. We want to have this discussion. And our very first event we did was a community discussion over policing. And we had police and students, and I think a sociology professor on the panel. And one of the things I learned in library school is that if you cannot find something in the library that upsets you, you're not doing a good and fair job. And I think about that event because I had people say this was biased against police, and then others, this was biased for police. I'm like, aha, that I did it right. If I have both sides upset. And they weren't really upset. They were expressing, but I love it. And when we had Angie Thomas here, we always do a Q&A and we ask a guest to help with that. And one of the Riley Manhattan K-State Police Department officers was part of the Q&A. And it was a wonderful experience. If we had had a different response, we would have had more conversations and maybe we wouldn't have selected the book. But they were on board, and I appreciate that. And we do it for every book. We want to make sure that we have support. And when people call me and they are upset, usually it's moms. And what I hear is my child is leaving me for the first time, and I'm a little nervous. And I'm always willing to have those conversations because I know what it's like when you are afraid for someone, and I'm never going to tell them that they're wrong. So the book could have been the reason, but that's not like the real reason that they have some concerns.
And I don't want to say public libraries don't do this, but one thing I think we can embrace from our academic librarian friends is the data driven. It's there's so much going on to put on programs and to offer services. And when staff are limited, sometimes I feel like the first thing to go out is how do you evaluate your program so that you can change it. So granted, you have a lot of resources for that, but I think if there's one thing that we could take away from that is really looking at the numbers, taking the numbers, looking at it, and not being afraid to kind of adapt to that. But
Yeah. And I want to caution, I want people to be data informed. They don't always have to be data driven. So an example could be if you're in a school library and the numbers show that students aren't reading nonfiction from your school library, you wouldn't get rid of all the nonfiction just because students aren't reading it. But knowing that they're not reading it, it gives you a different opportunity to maybe collect. Maybe it's the subject matter, maybe it's the promotion, maybe it's the book covers. So you can say, we're still going to offer nonfiction books because we're a library and that's part of our values. But we need to think about what we're doing because none of the students are reading nonfiction.
um, as we finish up, Tara, I just wondered, since we are in partnership with Kansas Library Association, so I like to give a shout out to professional organizations and ask, are there any organizations you belong to? If so, what do you get out of them?
I appreciate that question, and I'm going to be honest. I'm not currently a member of any, but that's going to change. I used to be a member of ALA and KLA, and I stopped. But I'm going to rejoin because I see a lot of things going around in the world regarding libraries, and it makes me very sad. And I want to support them, and I think there's only so many ways I can help. And one way can be to help by becoming a member and paying dues so that they can provide the advocacy to libraries that we're needing right now.
Well, thank you so much. We will be happy to, not that I'm speaking for Kayla, but I know they would embrace all of anybody in Kansas because as you said, there is a target on libraries and I think KLA knows that we're stronger together. And I think when academic schools and public and even special libraries work together, there's a lot we can get out of that. So I want to just end with thanking Tara for being here. Um, it was such a pleasure to get to talk to somebody from one of our major Regent schools and let us know how things work there. And I would encourage all of you to stop by there if you're ever in Manhattan. You won't be sorry that you did. So thank you, Tara. We're going to
Thanks
go
for the
ahead and end
invitation.
it. Yeah, you bet. We'll see you all, I hopefully, at another month's Focus On program. End the room. Bye.
Bye.